Okay, fine. Microsoft Paint's not good enough for you. I get it. I get it. Okay, whatever. We're ritzy out here in these parts. Fine. We'll use Challenge. We'll use an actual bracket website. Following up on the video that we made for yesterday, we're going to talk today about seeding. That was something that a lot of people asked questions about in the comments of that video. And seeding is something that I think a lot of newer players to tournaments will not understand, will think is fundamentally unfair. They'll complain about it right away as soon as they find out what it is. But it's actually a really important factor in making sure that a tournament runs in a way that is fair and that accomplishes its purpose. So, if you remember from the last video, a tournament's job is to determine what the best player or what the best team is that entered that day. And there's a problem that can arise if a bracket does not go through a process called seeding. So I have right here a single elimination bracket. This is the simplest way that we can get this explained, but it will factor into all of the different systems that we use for tournaments. So we'll talk about a little bit briefly about how that works in the different systems. And you'll see here, I've just thrown in a list of participants. That's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And they're in that order. And this order actually matters. We'll talk about that in a second. But you'll see here, I put them in at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is not the order that they got put into the bracket here, and that is for a reason. Let's say that we run it exactly like that. Okay, so we'll swap everybody around, which you can thankfully do in this software. Challenge is very cool for that, and Battlefy is very not cool for that. Hey, Battlefy, you should probably make it so that that works, and you don't have to type the numbers in repeatedly to get them right. And if you make one mistake, you have to rewrite all of them below. Okay, anyway. We've got them ordered in this way now. So let's say we just start playing this tournament as is. What's going to happen is, player 7 going to play against player 8, and we're just going to assume that anyone with a lower number is going to beat anybody with a higher number. The first best player in the room to 8th best player in the room. So, 7 is going to win. 5 is going to win. Looking so far so good. 3 is going to win. And 1 is going to win. And then from here, we'll have 1 win over 3. We'll have 5 win over 7. And then 1 wins over 5. So look at the standings for this tournament for a second. Here's the way that this would look on a placement sheet. Player 1 gets first place. Okay, great job. We found the player in the room that was the best at the game on that day. So that means mission accomplished, right? Well, a lot of the time tournaments have placements and prizes for those placements that go beyond first place. So a lot of the time it's important to get maybe the top 8 correct, or the top 3 correct, or something like that. So let's keep going down the list and figure it out. Okay, so second place goes to number 5, the 5th best player in the room. Okay, so maybe that one wasn't quite as effective there. Third place is a tie between number 3, okay, that worked out fine, and number 7. And then in a tie for 5th beyond them, we have number 8. Okay, I mean, they should have gotten last place, probably. Number 6, yeah, okay, fine. Number 4, probably should have at least made it to the next round, if they're in the top half, they should be in the top half. And number 2, second best player in the entire tournament, eliminated round 1, because they put them up against literally the only opponent in the entire room that should have been able to beat them. So we're not actually getting results that are reflective of the skill level of these players from setting up the tournament this way. All we can get right is who's number 1. Everything after that is just meaningless. The person who should have gotten second place, the person who is good enough to get second place, getting last, the person who could have played every single one of these players in a round robin and beaten all of them, still getting last place, that doesn't make any sense at all. This actually happened to me once in a little tournament I ran into at a game store once. It was me and a friend of mine who were both competitive players, and everybody else there was like a very casual, not only casual, but also child. Like, nobody, I think, in the tournament was older than like 12 or something. And we were both adults at this point. We just stopped by because, like, hey, there's a Smash tournament. We play Smash, right? They made me play my friend round 1. And so I got eliminated round 1, even though, again, I could have taken the other 3 players that were at that tournament if they played me all at once. That's the kind of thing that happens when you don't organize the first matches properly. So now let's go back to how things work out when we let the challenge software here do what it's trying to do. You'll see here, we start off with the top player, the one that we expect to win, playing against the weakest player, and the second best player playing against the second weakest, the third playing against the third weakest, and then the 2 in the middle are playing against each other. So this match is least likely to be upset, which makes sense if our goal is to figure out who's actually the best. We would want to bias the tournament such that the player who is most likely to win is most likely to win. This seems like a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but if we think about what happened earlier, where this player knocked out the number 1 person who is most likely to upset them and who could have beaten everybody else in the room, we realize that this will give us better results. So let's see how this plays out here. So now, the players who have advanced to the next round of the bracket, the top half, are players 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 4 players that we expected were going to play the best. And the players that we expected to play the weakest are the ones who are out in the first round. And the same thing will happen in this round as well. We'll get player 1 through, we'll get player 2 through, and now player 1 wins. So here, what happens is, player 1 is in first place, player 2 is in second, players 3 and 4 tie for third place, and then players 5 through 8 tie for fifth place. And those are the results that we would expect based on any prior rankings that we had of these players. You can say, well, okay, but how is that fair to, player 8? They didn't get a chance to prove themselves. Well, if we didn't expect that they were going to be able to beat anybody, then sure, we could have given them a chance by putting them up against maybe player 7 or something, the first player that they might upset. But then who does player 2 have to play but player 1? We know that player 2 is going to do incredibly well against almost everybody, just from our prior knowledge. There's usually a huge skill gap in esports. Usually, that number 1, that number 2 player, those guys have so many thousands of hours in the game. Those guys are known. Those guys have won more tournaments than player 8 has ever entered. So, for at least the top few finishers, you can kind of look at them and be like, yeah, those guys probably not going to lose. And so you can kind of make these predictions pretty reliably. It's usually only until you get down to like the bottom half of players where TOs, tournament organizers, the people who have been running these tournaments in and out for such a long time, it's only until you get down to about that point, about halfway through the roster of players that are at the tournament, that you tend to run out of people that you know. Knowing that, certain players are certainly more likely to be able to move forward, we can pretty reliably make these kinds of predictions, especially with a group of players that we've seen before. Seeding is always going to make a tournament more fair. It's always going to make it so that the better players are more likely to win, because that's what fair means. Fair means that you're not adding all of these silly elementary school rules about, well, you weren't allowed to tag me because I was touching the base. We didn't talk about a base. Well, there's a base now. None of that sort of stuff. We're just making it so that everybody enters agreeing on the rules and everything, and we're playing the same game, and these are the players that we know are most likely to win, and we're giving everybody a chance. Player 8 could beat player 1 here. player 5 could definitely beat player 4 here. And, if someone has shown in, other matches that, like, hey, this player 8 right here, they beat player 7 last time, you should probably give them the 7 spot. They can start working their way up to the point where they get to more winnable matches the longer that they've been around in the community. Something that also helps with that is when you make a double elimination bracket instead of a single elimination bracket. Because now, instead of just losing to the top player every single time and being out immediately, you have another chance. And we'll show a little bit about how that second chance can work, and then we'll also show how it works in some of the other formats. So here now, we have a double elimination tournament. Same exact seeding as before, because remember, in a double elim tournament, the first round is exactly the same as it would be in a single elim. But now you see everybody drops down to here, and this round is usually pretty winnable for any of these players. Bottom half, a lot of the time these players aren't really seeded that carefully. The tournament organizers just don't have that kind of knowledge. So who knows, maybe the 8 seed could beat the 5 seed. 6 seed could definitely lose to the 7 seed. That's a totally possible upset. So it gives everybody a much better chance in their next round, because the only people they're getting paired up against are the people who were in the bottom half of that first round there. So double elimination is already a lot more lenient, and allows for, much closer matches for everybody involved. So let's say that we've even got a badly seeded double elimination tournament. So we're doing that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 thing that we were doing earlier that we've established in a single elim tournament really doesn't work very well. This actually really helps fix a lot of the problems that even bad seeding can add. This is one of the reasons that we really like, adding that extra round in the double elimination. Because, we'll still end up with the winner's bracket going the way that we expect it to here, ending up with 1 versus 5, but notice that player 2 isn't just out. So now they actually get a chance to prove themselves, because they are better than player 4. They are better than player 7. And they get to keep kind of going through the bracket like this. So this happens. Player 1, of course, is going to beat player 5 here. And then player 2 is going to beat player 5, end up against 1 in the finals, and then lose to player 1, is what we expect to happen here. So now, in these standings, where before it was just an absolute crapshoot, we're actually starting to approach the way that the placements should actually be. We're going to have first, number 1 in first place. We're actually going to have player 2 in second. Player 5 got third, which isn't really correct, but it is closer. Player 3 got fourth, which is only 1 spot off. That's not too bad. Then players 6 and 7 end up tying for 5th, a little bit higher than they should be because player 4 is the one who gets the worst of it with bad seeding here. But then player 8 is where they should be. So the only people that are really off here are player 4 and player 5. Pretty much everybody else is in about the order that you want them to be in. That's so much better than what we had before with the poorly seeded single elimination bracket. So with double elimination, you are much more resilient against bad seeding than you are in single elimination. And that's another advantage that I didn't mention because we hadn't talked about seeding in the previous video. Now, even outside of the context of brackets, this stuff still holds up. So let's think about a round-robin event. Haha, I tricked you. We are back to Microsoft Paint. It's just a lot easier to draw these brackets up here than it is to get them to look right in Challenge. So let's say we're doing 2 round-robin pools, and we decide that we're going to put the top 4 contestants in one pool, and the other, the bottom 4 contestants in another pool. Well, what's going to happen is if you decide, okay, top 2 make it out, you're going to get player 1 and player 2 out of there, but player 3 and player 4 don't make it out, even though they're the ones that we want to make it into the final round. Because if we've got 2 round-robin pools of 4, then we're taking the top 2 from each one. The hope is that we have the top 4 contestants coming out, but instead, it's going to be 1 and 2 versus 5 and 6 who make it out of the other one. We're not looking for that. So seeding definitely matters here as well. In Swiss, we talked about how you want player 1 playing player 5, 2v6, 3v7, and 4v8. Now, this does look different than it did in the elimination bracket, but here's why. We don't want player 1 playing player 8 because that actually disadvantages player 1 compared to the other folks in the tournament. In Swiss, when it comes down to a tiebreaker, one of the things that it considers, which we mentioned briefly, is the Buchholz coefficient. It considers the difficulty of the opponents that you've played against. So if you have an equal record with someone, but it determines that you have played against more difficult opponents to beat, then it will give you the edge over that player in the tiebreaker. So it is to player 1's advantage to actually play against the strongest player that they can beat. In order to set it up so that player 1 is the one who's most likely to come out on top, that they're not going to get, skipped over by the tournament format, you don't want them playing against player 8, because when player 2 beats player 7, then player 2 is actually getting a higher Buchholz coefficient because they're playing against a stronger opponent than player 1 is. And if the tiebreaker were to be between player 1 and player 2 would actually get the advantage on them, at least for that one win. So in Swiss, you set it up so that, player 1 versus player 5, you expect player 1 to be able to win that, but you also give them a slightly bigger challenge than you give, say, player 4, because, again, the goal here is to set it up so that the player who's most likely to win is also most likely to win in that tournament format. They have earned their stripes by being there, being recognized as one of the strongest players around, and so they've earned, the benefit of the doubt a little bit by being given that slight advantage in the tournament seeding. Hopefully that's explained a little bit about how that works and how that functions in different systems. Let me know if you have any questions and if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about. And we'll be back with more Splatoon-related content tomorrow. Should be talking a little bit about the Tentabrilla. Intriguing. Yes, I know. We'll see you there.